We have our own data that shows us Gen Z really want to be in store. People will say, oh, really? Gen Z? They're doing everything online. It's not true.
I think the narrative around a retail apocalypse came from one thing. People using the word store and retail interchangeably. It's not about adding another channel. It's what role do these physical formats play in your overall ecosystem? It has to be a footprint with a purpose.
Customer experience is all about slowing down the sale, stay a little longer, have a glass of champagne.
So what you want is your physical stores to be a compelling place to visit that lifts your entire organization.
Welcome to the Luxury Edit Unpacked. My name is Silvia Coleman. I'm the Head of Market Intelligence and VP Strategic Growth for CXG. CXG, as you may know, is a global consulting company specializing in customer experience, and we work with many, many luxury and premium brands across the globe. And I am thrilled today because I am here welcoming a very special guest, Michael Zakkour. Michael, welcome to our show. It's a very special honor and pleasure having you here. You're a well-known personality in retail circles, in finance, in the digital world, but I'm going to introduce you anyway for those who don't know. Michael is the founder and CEO of 5 New Digital and the managing director at SellSide Group M&A. He's an internationally recognized thought leader. He's a best-selling book author. I think you've had 2 number 1 best-selling books, an innovator, a strategist in integrated retail, digital commerce, and consumer behavior. And he has over 30 years of experience working both on the agency as well as the corporate sides, and has been a multiple exit entrepreneur. So as such, many brands come to him for expert advice, including retailers, CPGs, and e-commerce companies that are trying to adapt in this very dynamic retail landscape that we're experiencing today. Michael, your work on unified commerce and the new retail model has really reshaped how we think about digital transformation. You and I have talked about this. You kind of advocate and propose this idea around the fact that the future isn't about channels or touch points, but it's really about creating meaningful experiential habitats and ecosystems where people love spending time, which is what we call dwell time. And we know from our work at CXG that when brands really lean into the customer experience, when they really focus on customer centricity and relationship building rather than all the transactional aspects alone, that we see conversion rates rise dramatically. So the conversation today that we're going to have sits at this intersection. It's around how digital scaling meets luxury CX principles and how ecosystems really replace channels. So with that, I'm going to dive straight into my first question, which is to do with blind spots. So I mentioned earlier, our data shows that when brands focus on customer centricity, we see a massive impact on conversion. In fact, our data shows us a multiplier of 5 times in terms of purchase intent. And usually purchase intent translates into conversion. And when you and I talked last time, we were talking about this notion of how we should really be thinking instead of points of service or points of sales, about points of experience. So POE instead of POS, right? So I love this concept and we're going to talk about it more. But my first question to you, for premium and luxury DTC brands, let's say a brand wants to go from 10 million to 100 million. They're on that roadmap. What's the number 1 experiential blind spot that you would say that really slows down their growth trajectory? And before even the DTC brand notices that they're really bleeding customers.
So I think it starts with your point about consumer centricity. A lot of companies talk the talk on consumer centricity. Not all of them walk the walk on it. When I think about consumer centricity, yes, we want to be obsessed with the consumer. That should be our obsession. But also, I think it comes from a different point of view where with all the changes that have taken place in retail, online, offline, new channels, we've kind of conditioned the consumer to have one overriding demand, which is now spoil me or else.
Mm-hmm.
Spoil me or else I will find the brand, the retailer, the online platform, the luxury player that is willing to spoil me, right? So if you think about consumer centricity, it should be about how do we spoil the consumer in every aspect of our relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it starts with this idea around points of experience. We as an industry have been, rightfully so in most ways, somewhat obsessed around points of sale.
Mm-hmm.
I argue that we should be thinking a lot less about points of sale and thinking about establishing points of experience on the entire 360 journey for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a consumer centricity point of view, which is if you do that, you are going to spoil the consumer no matter where they are with you,
Mm-hmm.
in the store, online, in a promotion, wherever they're going to be, in a pop-up, right? By the way, points of experience extend to ordering.
Mm-hmm.
And UX and
Mm-hmm.
every aspect of CX. And by the way, a point of experience is when you get the package or
Mm-hmm.
when you walk out of the store with your bag and your box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've found is that you can turn almost any great point of experience into a point of sale,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very hard to turn a point of sale into a great point of experience. So when you're talking about where are some of these blind spots, how do you go from a 10 to 50 to 100 million, premium or luxury D2C brand? Well, what we all realize is you can only scale so far digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a point of diminishing returns on the cost of consumer acquisition digitally. And if you're only digital, you're not getting the true halo effect. You're not reaching your largest possible audience, right? And really, we saw this if you go back towards the end of the first phase of the D2C mania, when Casper and Warby Parker all
Right.
started to come out. There was a reckoning, right around the period of COVID or right before, where all these companies realized two things. They kind of reached the limit on who they can reach online. That's number one. And number two, the companies that were backing them financially were now demanding profit over growth. And so it really forced a lot of these premium luxury companies to think about, okay, how do we go from digital only to building a store? Or not going to use the term omni-channel.
Mm-hmm.
We could use the term omni-channel in the sense that if you're going from one channel to several, you become omni-channel.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to use the word in any sense beyond that, because really what you want to be is you want to be unified,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want to have a
Mm-hmm.
unified commerce
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Having a lot of channels is great, but if you're not integrating the data, if you're not integrating your marketing, if you're not integrating those points of experience, right, then you just have multiple channels. That's
Mm-hmm.
not unified commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And the winners today are deploying two things: a full understanding of what we call the new retail model, the full integration of online, offline technology, supply chain, and media to create a commercial ecosystem. And then they're graduating into unified commerce, which is how do we connect the front, the back, and the middle of that 360 consumer journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If we had to do a visual representation, it's not multiple paths. It's more like a web that's interconnected and functions optimally. But because you mentioned Warby Parker and was it Casper you mentioned, I feel like that point of experience, when I think of our brands, luxury and premium brands, and Casper and Warby Parker are premium brands for sure. That point of experience can very often be after sales service.
Mm-hmm.
What happens after the transaction? There's a huge opportunity here for brands to tap into that and to, create engagement and loyalty and, upsell, cross-sell, create that customer lifetime value. And another area that I want to talk about, because you mentioned spoil me, and my thought went to the work we're doing. A lot of our brands have their main clientele is either VIC customers or core customers. And these customers are, target groups that demand a very, very high level of bespoke and a very, very high level of personalization, along with, this idea of spoil me and digital integration. In order to provide that level of experience, we promise our customers, or many brands promise their customers, this great digital integration in terms of the customer-facing processes. And oftentimes we find that all of that is in place, but the infrastructure behind the scenes that's necessary to make it work is kind of limping behind it a little bit. So that's really my question. When we look at DTC brands and they've reached scale, what, in your opinion, is the first thing that breaks? Is it sort of the technology that enables the technology infrastructure that should be enabling that level of personalization, or that, spoil me effect? Is it the human capability, the training that we deliver to our advisors that breaks? Is they're not delivering it as they should? Or is it the organizational structure? And then how does that affect, the CX ecosystem at large?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the breaks are potentially there even before you start to build and deploy. Running a successful D2C brand online only doesn't necessarily qualify you and your company to be great merchandisers, retailers in the physical world, right? It's interesting because it mirrors my journey a little bit in that, I started off my work life in retail, working for Macy's in the mall when I was a teenager, and working for the Gap and working at the record stores. And then, when Web 1.0 came around, I fell into the very earliest days of e-commerce. And I had to really, after 12 years in e-commerce, I had to relearn how physical retail works and how different it is. And so, most professionals are coming from the brick and mortar world and saying, how do we figure out digital? I think, what I have in common with some of these D2C companies is we came from the digital world and then had to figure out how to be really good at physical. So I'd say the first inflection point is do your homework and understand what a physical environment is and isn't. And think about how to create a free-flowing, natural environment in that store. And this is what I mean. You're asking where it can break down. I judge it this way. If in most cases I walk into a physical retail environment, and as I walk in, I'm so taken with what I'm immersed in that I leave all of my thoughts and worries at the door. And for that 20 minutes, half an hour that you have me there, my head is with you and my problems are out there. You've done it right. Right. And the opposite is true. You can walk into a store and you might actually look around and carry your problems and your thoughts into the store, or the store can actually exacerbate them. I won't mention any names here, but, walking into some big department stores where you see, the clothing and the merchandise all over the floor, and racks, sadly limping in the corner, and disinterested store clerks looking at their phone. But that reminds me of all the things about the world outside that I didn't want to be reminded of.
Chaos and
in
disorder.
The store. Chaos and disorder. Right. And so that's first, before you allow yourself to be in the position to fail, really, really understand what the physical environment is like. I'd say the other one is trying to force feed what's special about online commerce into a store also doesn't work. This is the most exciting time we've ever seen for in-store tech. But you have to be really careful about how you deploy it, how visible, right? So in a highly visible case, you're doing just walk out. The tech is the store. If I can walk in, grab something, and walk out without a cashier, the tech is front and center in the store. Right. But there are ways of putting the tech behind the scenes so that it's not in your face in the store that do enhance. So when you're looking at that tech divide, it's like, is the tech you're using enhancing that point of experience, or is it detracting from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important, is understanding that. And then number two is you really have to have a clear vision of what this ecosystem-based commercial paradigm is about now. And really saying, okay, we may have started in it digital, but in a world that demands the complete great integration of online, offline tech, entertainment, and supply chain, well, what does that mean now for the stores itself? And what does it mean for our online? And what does it mean for our brand overall?
Mm-hmm.
So I think understanding the context in which you're going to open a store and understanding the dynamics of what make a store run well or not are the two biggest areas where people get tripped up.
Yeah. It's so really translating your digital DNA and what excites people and what gives them enthusiasm in that digital ecosystem, finding a way to translate that blueprint into retail as you understand yourself as a brand in the context of what's going on, right? Not so easy to do. And, speaking of scaling into retail, since we're talking about that, we've seen in the last few years a lot of DTC brands like Skims, you mentioned Casper, Parachute, you name it, there's lots of them, Glossier, many of them really successfully entering retail. And so in terms of customer acquisition costs, once a DTC brand reaches about 50 to 75 million, they usually realize customer acquisition costs, that line item that reads digital marketing, starts to exceed a certain percentage of revenue. It becomes unsustainable. And they also realize they're leaving a large swath of customers on the table that they could be, addressing and kind of bringing into the fold with physical retail. So they go into physical retail. But I think the danger lies in seeing that as just another channel, as opposed to, as you say, kind of seeing it as part of the ecosystem, right? So when a premium or a luxury DTC brand begins to make this pivot into bricks and mortar, what, in your opinion, is the strategic sequences that will preserve this digital DNA that we started with as they're building their customer-centric experience? What are some typical mistakes that brands might make in this arena?
Yeah, I think, again, thinking that technology is the answer to everything in a store isn't necessarily the right way to begin your thought process around it. I think the most important thing is to really think about, like what you said really resonated there. It's not about adding another channel. It's what role do these physical formats play in your overall ecosystem? It has to be a footprint with a purpose, or it has to be a footprint with multiple purposes. And at the top of the list of those purposes should be the store formats, whatever you choose, should lift the entire company.
Right.
It should be lifting what you're doing online. It should be lifting what you're doing in social. It should be lifting what you're doing, as a responsible member of the community. It should be lifting what you're doing in philanthropy, right? So the store should, right? This idea now that physical environments are storehouses of product is ridiculous. You're really just, you're leaving yourself at the basis concept of what that physical environment is. But something else you said really resonated too, which is when a D2C company, premium, luxury, what have you, decides to get into retail. Okay, there we have to pause for a moment because, and I think you might have heard me hint around this before, but when we started seeing those headlines in 2012, 14, every other newspaper or magazine was touting the retail apocalypse.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
The retail apocalypse.
Yes.
It was on every front page for years. And I looked at that and I said, this is patently ridiculous. I'm of the opinion we are in a retail renaissance. And I think the narrative around a retail apocalypse came from one thing. People using the word store and retail interchangeably. A store is a store. It's a physical format, right? Retail is the act of selling something to somebody else, right? So now if you look how we define what retail is, well, you and I have the ability to be individual retailers today, right? I can sign up with some services, go into a store, scan QR codes, run a live stream, and have people buy in real time for me. I'm just one guy. I can do that. It's easy.
Yeah.
I'm a retailer, right? And then you start getting into the questions of, when you look at the FANG companies and the big seven, then we have to start asking questions about who's a retailer, who's a wholesaler, who's a technology company, who's a supply chain company, who's an entertainment company. Well, the answer is you have to be a little bit of all of those to succeed today. So I just want to be very careful that we don't mix up the term store and retail, right? So what you want is your physical stores to be a compelling place to visit that lifts your entire organization. That to me, if you go into, D2C, into physical, and you're not seeing it that way, you're missing half the plot.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned retail apocalypse. Not only did the retail apocalypse not happen, but we're back in the stores. I mean, really the pandemic gave us like a boost in terms of wanting to be engaged in the stores. And a lot of people say to me, we have our own data that shows us Gen Z really want to be in store. People will say, oh, really? Gen Z? They're doing everything online. It's not true. They are doing both, to your point. They're shopping online, but they also want to be in store. And when they're in store, they want to feel exactly what you described, that hour that they're in there. In fact, if they're there for an hour, then they're enthralled. If they come in and leave after 10 minutes, you did something wrong, right?
Spoil me or else.
Spoil
right?
me or
Give
else.
me
This is a very good slogan.
That entry point to the brand or the retailer can be anywhere, right? If we have that circle, we should have, a 360-degree on-ramp for people to meet the brand, meet the product, meet the retailer. And then, like you said, it should be more like a spider web, the way you're setting that up. So, part of spoiling them is giving them the great feeling when they're online, the great feeling when they're in a physical environment, a great feeling around whatever your philanthropy or your company philosophy is. I mean, that's spoiling people, is making them feel like part of the family.
Exactly.
Right? And once you can activate that feeling of I'm part of the family, the rest takes care of itself.
And part of the family equals that's community. You're talking about community, right? Which is so important, but we'll get to that. I want to talk about, because we talked about the retail apocalypse that never happened. In fact, the opposite. And we talked a little bit about Gen Z and Spoil Me. This whole idea around, or this trend or phenomenon of dupes, right? Everybody's talking about it. We cannot ignore it. We know from our research that around 50% of luxury consumers in China are shopping dupes. We haven't done the research in the US, but we know it anecdotally. It's around the same number. We see it all the time. And so, there's a lot of pressure on premium and luxury brands to, well, number one, provide a good value proposition, because that's what the consumer is looking for. And brand name alone doesn't suffice. A store front, a retail touch point doesn't suffice. We need to create emotional bonds. If we think our value proposition is okay, well, then we need to really lean into creating those emotional bonds. So my question is, when you're a DTC brand, and everything's working really great in your, digital ecosystem, and you have those CX, memorable touch points in your digital footprint, are there any things that you can translate into, as you scale and you enter retail, bricks and mortar, what are some transferable memorable CX touch points that you could easily, and I'm sure it's brand specific, but maybe you have some examples around that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to look at it both ways, right? So what can we do in our digital footprints that we're grabbing from the physical environment? That's awesome. But also, what can we grab from the digital environment and power that physical environment with that as well? So I'll give you one example. I'll give you a few, but there's a couple that I really like. So one example like of in-store tech that's not in your face, but provides a great experience is in-store RFID, right? So RFID,
Burberry.
It's been up, it's been down, it's too expensive, it'll never be adopted. Well, guess what? It finally got adopted, but in the back room, right? But when you put RFID in all the products on the floor, imagine a situation, because I don't have to imagine it, I've been in that situation where, let's just say I'm in an electronics store and I see the TV I want to buy, but there's no box there. It just has the label. And can you help me find this TV? And the salesperson, he'd rather probably poke his eyeballs out than go in the back room and try and find it. And he doesn't understand how to log in and log off of his handheld. And so he'd just rather walk away from you and see the company lose the sale, right? On the other hand, when you have a tabulator this big and you press one button and it tells you that TV is in stock, it's just in the next aisle because somebody moved it and forgot to put it back, right? What you've done now is you've empowered the store associate, which an empowered store associate is going to give a better experience.
Absolutely.
Right. So even that's, how technology, something that we take from the digital world, right? Look, part of the good thing about e-commerce is somewhere, some way, somehow, you're going to find the product you want to buy, right? Not always true in a physical environment. The downside of that online is we're 25 years into this e-commerce experiment, and sadly, the vast majority of e-commerce sites are still just glorified digital catalogs, right?
True.
They're flat, they're two-dimensional, they scroll, they click, you look at a picture, you look at a description, maybe you put something in your cart, maybe you don't. Maybe you actually go through with the transaction, right? So where are we? We're in a situation where we've done all of these amazing things from a technology point of view for digital shopping. But for the most part, I think most people would tell you it's flat, boring, one-dimensional buying. That's not what we want with our consumer, right? How do we spoil them? By providing them three-dimensional, dynamic, immersive shopping. Big difference between buying and shopping, right? And so, RFID in store is a great trick of the trade to make sure we have the product and we know where it is at all times. That's just one example. Another one I love is I recently got to visit the new Printemps store.
That's an amazing
Wall
store.
Street.
Yeah, what'd you think?
And it is absolutely mind-blowing, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, everything like I'd want in a modern physical format for a premium brand. Anybody who's listening to this and is in the New York area, please go down to Wall Street and go see the Printemps. I mean, they shaped the consumer experience even through architecture. One of the most fascinating to me is there are no right angles in that store. There are no corners. Even the bricks and the glass, right, in the sectionals, everything is curved. And it's meant to give you that feeling of you're just flowing through time and space, that you're not making turns.
That's an Apple concept. With Apple products, there are no straight angles. It's all curved.
Everything is curved. Right?
Psychological.
So even down to that, and so what they've done is, they're another good example of their intent on not putting technology in your face in the store, right? But they are aware of what that online aesthetic feels like, and the color palettes and the curves and the experience. And so I think they're a great example of, what a modern physical footprint can be. And it's a damn good way to spoil your customer, right?
Yeah, fantastic.
Just, I guess the last one I would throw out there too is, I'm an avid fisherman. You can tell just by looking at me, right?
Your cap right now.
For sure. But yeah, I love to fish, saltwater, freshwater. So one of my happiest places on earth is Cabela's. The Cabela's is the, giant outdoor retailer. and talk about walking in and forgetting everything and being spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you walk into a Cabela's, the first thing you see on your right is an aquarium, an actual aquarium, saltwater and freshwater.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a literal mountain populated by taxidermy, beasts. They have a carousel. They have store in stores. They have associates who know everything about what they're selling in the store, the merchandising and So I walk in there for an hour. I'm in Cabela's world.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I think they're a really good example of how you can blend the bells and whistles and excitement of a digital world with the feel and the hominess and the spoiling of the physical format.
Yeah, so you mentioned Cabela's and Printemps, and I was there a few months ago. I had the same experience. It was transcendental. It's almost retailtainment, right?
Yep.
If you can give the customer the feeling that they're, through the product and the experience, that they're transporting themselves into that world. Like, you're in Cabela's and you're basically now, you have the feeling, or you can imagine what the feeling would be like of being in Montana fly fishing, right? Just by being in that store, it's giving you that taste of being there. In Printemps, it's everything. It's the architecture. It's, this Art Deco feeling. It's, all those Parisian brands, French brands that you've never seen anywhere else before. And you sort of have visions of yourself wearing them, maybe being in Paris. But what I found at Printemps too, the integration of technology, while it's not visible to you as a customer in terms of speed. They pull up their iPads. Mm-hmm. They immediately, very quickly get you all the information, check you out, because it is about speed and efficacy. Mm-hmm. That's the DTC principle we should be bringing into retail, to have everything at our hands. And RFID, that's what it does, right?
Yeah. Or, I like what you said there. I'd almost extend it out a little bit to say, create an environment where the consumer, the shopper, can operate at their own speed. Mm-hmm, Some people might want to be facilitated quickly with those handheld devices. Mm-hmm. Others might want to spend 4 hours lingering in the store and, getting a coffee at the coffee shop. Mm-hmm. So, just part of spoiling is endless choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's right? So true. It's so true.
So, give people the ability to inquire, shop, think, feel at their own pace. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of it. And again, when you think about digital commerce, it allows you that. Mm-hmm. It allows you, I can stay shopping online for as long.
To linger, right?
To linger, or, sometimes I know exactly I need this lure, and screw it. I'm just going to Amazon.com. I hit the buy now button and I get it the next morning. Like, sometimes that's fine. Mm-hmm. But again, I think one thing we have to be very conscious of in the context of this conversation, though, and I've been doing this for 30 years, I think the transformation that is taking place in the retail and branding world right now is greater than any I've ever seen in my lifetime, mm-hmm. including the advent of the internet and e-commerce. Mm-hmm. I just think fundamentally, we're seeing an intersection of technology, physical environments, digital environments that are absolutely changing people's consumer behavior. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there's an argument here about how much are the new environments we're creating changing consumer behavior, and how much new consumer behavior is driving the changes we have to make. And so that's a real challenge. If you're a D2C luxury brand who's now saying, okay, I want to think about different physical formats. By the way, now I have to think about social commerce. And now there's a lot to think about, to just say beyond just, okay, I'm going to go from digital to a store. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you got to say to yourself, how does that whole online, offline integration with all of these new channels play into your store plan?
I think it's very brand specific. You make a very good point. It's very brand specific. And I mean, these are very, very exciting times. But one way to figure that out is to look at data. It's brand specific. It's context specific. And look at your data. Listen to the customer. I mean, we talk about communities. That's for us so much easier as brands today to know what the customer wants when we build a community, because the customer is very, very vocal. And yeah, I mean, it's, I think the sky's the limit, today. In many ways, that's overwhelming for brands that are just beginning on their DTC journey or scaling. But there's a wealth of options for sure, and many things to think about. I want to talk a little bit about omnichannel. Now that's a little bit of a bad word. So we do a lot with customer journey mapping. We also do omni-channel customer journey mapping, but we're now advocating, we really want to move beyond this concept of just channels and talk about ecosystems and habitats as we have throughout this conversation. So I have a question, hypothetical example, okay, because we work with a lot of fashion and leather goods brands. I'm going to take an example from the world of handbags. So let's say we have a premium DTC brand priced somewhere between, let's say, $300 and $2,000. So it's kind of aspirational to lower end luxury. I mean, we've seen a lot of DTC brands that have scaled in this way, handbag brands like Polen. And so they're opening retail locations now, right? How should they map these experiential?
They're opening physical stores, you mean?
Yes, they're opening physical stores. Sorry, they are already in retail. Yes, correction, physical stores. So how should they be mapping these experiential habitats to prioritize the experience, right? What would be the first investment that bridges the gap between their sort of historically transactional digital touch points and this true experiential factor that we want to be living in store?
Yeah, you know, it is very brand and finance dependent in some ways, but generally speaking, I would advocate for starting small in physical and learning, and then expanding outwards, right? Kind of first land, then expand. I would never expect myself to walk onto a golf course for the first time and, to be able to hit, par. It's just not going to happen, right? I think there should be not as much pressure on the organization to think that they're going to get that physical or several physical formats right, perfect the first time. Allow yourself some room to grow and test. But I think the key really is you have to tie it back to the ecosystem and say, what is our ecosystem right now? Let's be honest about what is the extent of our ecosystem and how do we plan on growing it? And then say, what role do these physical formats play in us creating that circle of spoiled consumers? Yeah. It was interesting. I think, when Warby Parker went, and it was very much at first about, hey, we're not here to sell you glasses. We're here to give you our vibe and the Warby Parker way, and you can try them on. And, it wasn't a sales oriented format. And I think initially that resonated very well for them. So again, it's asking yourself, how much of this store do I want to be about, selling product? How much of it is about creating a halo effect for my other channels? How much of it is about a place where this is where we really create content community to lead to commerce, right? And so often we relegate the word content to the digital realm, but content is in the physical realm, right? Your merchandising, your decorations, your furniture, whatever you have in that store, that's content. And if you have a content-rich store and a content-rich online service, right, it's much easier to connect the two. And so I really think about, physical environments as a repository for content, but also you have to be very mindful about what role you want that store to play today right? It's almost like just, from a physical format point of view, what's our do now, do soon, and do later, right? That's really where it is. So I don't advocate going, real big, real fast. I think you take an incremental approach to it. So I'll just give you one case study where I think that really played out when we see that integration. So a few years ago, we were doing an immersive commerce strategy for a luxury women's apparel brand. And, obviously we had to really educate them on what immersive commerce is. And then we go a level deeper and we talk about the importance of having a video commerce strategy. And by the way, your physical environments should be an important part of your video commerce strategy. So as just one tactic in the playbook, we did a live stream from the flagship store. And it was hosted by the CEO and the granddaughter of the founder of the company.
Interesting.
And it was in this big, beautiful, glass ceiling, lots of sunshine in the room. And, we had two great hosts, and we had, the models walking around the store, and just so much excitement and buzz. And we did a 2-hour live stream. And by the way, I just want to put a note in there. I don't want the audience to confuse video commerce strategy with live streaming. Live streaming is just one tool for building content, community, and commerce. But think about that CCC, right? 2 hours in the store. We sold more merchandise in that 2 hours than we sold in that flagship on an average month. But that was actually the least impressive metric, because we ran a 4-week tracking study afterwards, and we found out foot traffic to that store went up 40% in the 4 weeks after. We found out site traffic went up 35% in the 4 weeks average. Average order volume across channels went up 25% in the 4 weeks after. And the return rate for the 2-hour live stream we did was 8%, which is, in normal digital commerce, in apparel, it tends towards 30, 40, 50%. So all of a sudden we said, this is how the physical store spoils the consumer and provides the content that builds community that naturally 4 weeks later leads to more commerce. That's what content, community, and commerce is about.
That's such a great example. You have to tell me what brand that was later on.
Offline.
Yes, offline. Talk about halo effect. That's like a great example of the halo effect. And since you mentioned it, this was going to be my next topic to talk about the triangle business model and the 3 C's, which I think you brought over kind of what you saw in China. You spent many years in China, helping brands scale, content, community, and commerce. So the 3 C's. Which one of these, I know, again, always it's brand specific, right? But if someone, pressed you to say, which one of these 3 C's is the unlock, in your opinion? And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier on before we started the podcast, that will make a retail or a store location really profit driving, not just a loss-making showroom, sort of Instagram-worthy showroom, but actually, a profit driving destination with that halo effect.
It's community.
Community, okay.
Right, because if you do your content well, in store, through your advertising, your marketing, whatever you're doing online, you build up that critical mass of great content, which then translates into building a critical mass of people who are absorbing and loving that content.
Yeah.
Once they've absorbed that content, okay, and said, this information, this context, this content is important to me, then all of a sudden they start finding lots of other people around them who feel the same way. Now you have the germs of a community. And once that community starts to swell, then that's the whole idea, is the commerce will follow. Right? Here, like, one of the most annoying things in the world to me is when I get a LinkedIn message and somebody wants me to accept their friend request, and I know I shouldn't, but I hit yes anyway. And you instantly get that message of, hey, Michael, are you in the market for a new roof?
Oh, yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
who sells like the first time in the first second when you meet somebody, right? Whether you're trying to sell your ideas or your personality, or you're trying to get financing for a Broadway play, who comes out, right?
It's an immediate no, right? When someone
it's
approaches
just an immediate no, right? Yeah. So I think there's something to that where, if you get the content in the community first, then you're not just getting in somebody's face and saying, buy this, right? That's a much different dynamic. And, I see it, in the work I do in finance, and I see it, in the work and I do in consulting too. We tend to just have conversations. If you have conversations with people, at some point their need and their pain point is going to come out. When they feel comfortable enough to open up to you and trust you, they're going to tell you what they really need, right? And consumers are kind of the same way too. I worked with Unilever and Nutrafol for a while, the massively successful,
very successful
hair growth supplement. By the way, the entire Nutrafol playbook was content, community, and commerce. I mean, I'm sure there are Harvard Business Studies out there on them now. They really perfected that art of building trust and community. Why? Hair loss is a very personal and uncomfortable subject for most people. But they managed to connect with consumers in a way that said, we feel your pain because we were in the same pain. That's why we're here. And we're just going to handhold you through this process. You don't need to buy something from us right now. Let's just talk about, the physical and mental scars that hair loss create. And then they rolled out, a brilliant onboarding quiz on the site that helped people understand where is their problem coming from, where is it now, how do they solve it. So it just, by the time you had all that content and that community and that trust, hitting the buy button for a 3-month pack of Nutrafol, it just...
Yeah, you said a very important word, which is trust.
Trust.
Right. And that's what these communities can build. I think that the beauty industry, because you mentioned Nutrafol, is really fertile ground for accelerating brand growth, leveraging community. And when it's coupled with purpose, or as you said, in this example, you're kind of solving a very specific, very personal challenge, or you couple it with purpose, it's so impactful. I was just in a conference where the founder of Say, which is a beauty brand that was founded about 6 years ago, I mentioned it earlier, they have hit after 6 years 100 million in revenue. So they're like will be a unicorn status beauty brand. But it's amazing. She talked a lot about purpose and community. It's built around clean beauty and, being environmentally aware and protecting the environment. And I mean, the community factor is so strong in driving all of this. And in beauty, it will be social commerce.
Absolutely. And it's that's even more important in a world where one thing I can say without a doubt, that consumers in Asia, right now we're talking about my experience in Asia. Listen, a lot of what I worked on over the last 10 years in the US and helped bring to this side of the world wasn't because I was particularly smarter than anybody else. It's I've been doing business in China for 15 years. So I had a 4-year head start on everything that was happening there that I thought was going to come here. One of the things that's happening over there right now, and this is critical for Western brands and retailers to come to terms with right now, is the entire infrastructure for how people think about, search for, research, browse for, and buy products is undergoing a complete change,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so what we're seeing in China, and we're starting to see it here too, is a lot of brands and retailers are still, as they should be, they have to make a transition, but you can't be completely married to mapping the consumer journey according to the way things have played out, physical and digital, over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not how people are moving through time and space anymore, right? It's not necessarily a linear buying processes anymore. So when I think about top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel, the sales funnel, the marketing funnel, about 5 years ago, I really started thinking seriously about how relevant that funnel model is in today's, world of commerce. And so I did a little bit of research on it. I had always assumed that the funnel model was a product of the Mad Men era, in the 60s on Madison Avenue, when advertising started to get more scientific. And it turns out the funnel model was actually invented in the 1880s.
Tell us more.
Well, I don't know if I need to tell you more. Maybe I could ask you a question. How relevant to a consumer journey in 2025 is a marketing and sales model that was created in 1880?
Probably not so much.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
And so what's happening now is we're moving towards spoiling the consumer and building points of experience by following the way consumers actually get information, and the way they're getting information, the way to seed the market now, far more emphasis on peer-to-peer conversation, right? So you're not necessarily, listen, it's not all the way here yet. I'm telling you what's coming, okay? It's here a little bit. What's coming is, and especially with, LLMs becoming de facto search engines and LLMs becoming important habitats for brand reputation as they become touch points for consumption, right? This idea that you can track the consumer journey from somebody clicked on your Google ad, okay, that got attributed, they went to the site, they bought something. Look, attribution has largely been a myth, in my opinion, for the better part of the last 6 or 7 years. The promise of Madison Avenue, in the digital age was, like Peter Druckenmiller said in the 70s, I know I'm wasting 50% of my ad revenue. I just don't know which 50%. So along comes digital advertising and said, you're never going to have to wonder which 50% you're wasting anymore, because we're going to attribute 90% of your ad spend. You're going to know where it came from and what it did. Hasn't really turned out that way. We could get into a whole different conversation about the digital advertising industrial complex, but that's not for today. The bigger point is when people are going to TikTok and then talking with their friends on Twitch and then posting something on Discord and then buying something, that doesn't look like the Google click, search, buy model that we're dependent on today.
Not at all.
So as these D2C luxury brands, again, it comes back to, right, context and perspective. They have to go into the physical retail world with the understanding of how digital commerce is fundamentally changing right now and what effect that's going to have on physical commerce as well.
But for brands, it's, super complex, because they have to be, what you're really saying, you have to be everywhere. Present everywhere in all of those, let's not call them channels, but points of experience, touch points, in sort of with consistency, right? And true to your brand DNA in every one of those places. And when I think of myself, I'm not Gen Z. You described a typical Gen Z shopper, and I'm not, but I shop that way. Yeah. Where something originates initially, or the multiple points in which it originates and where it ends up being an executed sale, can be so different in the instance of each individual shopper across their customer journey with many brands.
Right. And go right back to what you said at the beginning, and we've kind of glossed over it since then, which is physical retail matters.
Yes.
Still, right? So there were competing negative narratives around the retail apocalypse. One was there's a retail apocalypse, and the other narrative was because e-commerce is destroying physical retail.
Mm-hmm.
Never happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're 30 years into the e-commerce experiment, and 80% of all goods purchased in the United States are purchased in a physical store right now.
Yeah.
80%. Okay.
Amazing.
So, there were a lot of voices during that period, 2010, 15, who were saying basically this is the end of physical retail as we know it, and e-commerce is the future. And it just didn't play that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, coming back to what's a lesson that a luxury D2C company can learn is that physical is still 80%.
Mm-hmm.
It's still really important,
mm-hmm.
but it's how you use physical that's going to determine your success as a company as a whole,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you want to open a physical store and you're still operating on the principle from the 1990s when we judge a store's success by sales per square foot, you can't help but fail.
Yeah. It's those metrics, those KPI don't apply
those
anymore.
KPIs do not take into account
Mm-hmm.
the entire change in the consumer mindset and how they move through the universe
Mm-hmm.
and what really prompts. And this is one of the things I'm most excited about. We're working on this in our shop too. Is right. You brought up personalization before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We are moving away from reactive personalization to proactive personalization,
anticipatory.
predictive,
Yeah.
and that is what I'm really excited about, right? Because it's one thing to say, okay, here's what this person did in the past, so let's, judge our personalization or actions on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more interested in here's what that person did in the past, here's what they're doing in the present, and here's what we think they're going to want in the future.
Mm-hmm.
That's really exciting. So, when you bring up that question around, well, how do you scale personalization? How do you scale spoil? The technology and the tools and the paradigms are just basically opening up for that now.
Yeah. AI is going to turbocharge it, right?
Right.
I mean,
And
really,
let's not, confuse the issue here. I'm not advocating for people to go out and just use AI to create, their audio, their visual, their content, all that. I'm just saying where you're really seeing the effects of AI and other emerging technologies is it's allowing you to do these things on the back end that you don't see that allow us to do just what we've been talking about today.
Exactly.
Which is spoil the consumer.
Invisible technology to spoil the consumer.
I love it. Can I borrow that?
You may borrow it. I'm going to borrow some concepts from you as well. Okay, so I have a question about physical retail, and we kind of talked about it at various points already, but this paradox, right? We at our company, customer experience is all about slowing down the sale, stay a little longer, have a glass of champagne, tell us about yourself. We want to know you as a customer. What are your dreams? Linger and dwell. And then we have DTC, which is all about speed and efficacy and efficaciousness in the case of some products. So it's a seeming paradox, but maybe it's not, right? How can we blend it? How can we architect the retail experience and also the organizational culture? Because culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm quoting another famous strategist. And if you don't build a culture that will embrace that understanding of how you can blend these two to optimize, you're not going to succeed. So how do we do that, in your opinion?
So, yeah, I think that goes back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is create an ecosystem that allows people to move at their preferred speed at any given time, right? So sometimes they're going to want to linger. Like, I sometimes go to Cabela's just to hang out for an hour, and I'm going to walk out with one $5 fishing lure. Like, there are other times when I have a fishing trip planned for Saturday morning and it's Thursday and I don't have the lures I need. you're damn right I'm getting on Amazon or Cabela's.com and I want that shipped
Exactly.
overnight.
Exactly.
So it's a matter of that ecosystem should allow room for people who on a Tuesday they might want to move quickly. On a Thursday they might want to linger. Again, that's part of the spoiling, right? It's ubiquity, and allow them to choose what level of participation they want.
They want to engage in that moment, right?
In that moment.
But it's KYC. It's know your customer, or let your customer be who they want to be.
Yeah.
You need to
and
know
by the
them.
way, to follow on that,
yeah,
let them be who they want to be.
Yeah.
And listen to them tell you who
Listening.
and how and why I want to be.
Yeah.
Right? What's one of the most criminally underrated business intelligence platforms in the world today is the world. You have 4 billion people spouting off online about what they like and don't like about products, services, companies, brands. It's like, hey guys, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You've got the world's biggest focus group at your disposal.
That's right.
Use it.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Last question. And you already talked about this a little bit, but I hope you can give us a bit more from your arsenal of knowledge. We have done some research into, of course, I talked about it earlier, trends in China. The UAE, for example, is on fire. The retail there in premium and luxury is really booming. And they're looking to China and other Asian countries to inform how they should be evolving and incorporating novel retail concepts. So my question is, kind of piggybacking on what you already said earlier, is there anything that we want to talk about that's happening right now in Asia and in China, other than community, that we should be paying attention to here in the US or in Europe or the rest of the world, because it's coming and we want to be the first ones, with the seat at the table?
One for sure is the concept of the smart physical store, where there are multiple digital brains at work inside the store that make it a memorable experience for the people who are in there. Simple low-hanging fruit like, just walk out technology is obvious. But the way what these brands and retailers in China are doing very well is they are throwing AI and LLMs at everything, but they're not married to any of it. They're not sitting there saying, we believe this is the future and this is the way it's going to be. They're saying, hey, maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but I'm going to throw everything up against the wall and see what sticks. Now we're talking about from a physical format point of view. So I think this evolution from a tech-enabled store to a tech-brain store, I think you're going to start seeing that spread west in the next couple of years. Very interesting. The other big one, and I'll go back to it again because it's so important. Social commerce and peer-to-peer advocacy are what's selling product today. It's the model. So if you're taking a brand, right, there's 2 ways to approach China. Let's be honest, right? In that period from roughly 2000 to 2017, 18, it was all about, we got to take our brand and our products and our services to the Chinese consumer. Go, 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 right? And previous to that, of course, it was, we got to make our products. Couple things are happening over there right now, which is there's definitely a consumer slowdown, which is making it difficult for domestic as well as foreign brands and retailers at the moment, China in general. But there are 2 ways to think about China if you're a brand or retailer. One, what should we be doing about going into the market and participating there? And there's the other way of looking at it, which is, what can we learn from what's going on over there and incorporate it back into what we're doing here? So I think, we're at a point in the China relationship where, at least in the moment, I would encourage brands and retailers to go and do a learn from China. Now, there's two ways of doing that. Just going learn, or if you're there and operating, what are you learning there that you can move over here? But I think, it's really important. It's China certainly is a centerpiece, but things that are happening in Japan, things that are happening in Southeast Asia, where you're really seeing that very mature flourishing of the ecosystem model. And the benefits it accrues for the people, right? So one thing I would think about, for a D2C brand or a luxury brand or, somebody who's both is, you have to have a plan for how to participate and leverage and profit from the major ecosystems that other people have built. And at the same time, you need to learn how to build your own right size ecosystem for yourself. And that's what Chinese companies do very well. Okay. How do I participate in the ecosystem? How do I build my own ecosystem? And how do I connect those two? The other thing we're seeing over there is, I think, again, a similar situation that we're seeing in the U.S. a little bit, which is to some degree, trust in institutions has gone down, where trust in the people around you has gone up. And so I just think the way, this is what's incredible about companies like Shein and Temu and 1,000 others like them in China, is because they're mapping, tracking, and listening to the consumers in that peer-to-peer environment. That's why they're able to come up with a product that came out of the blue. People were buzzing about it online. It's hot for 9 months. They sell $100 million worth. They move on to the next thing. It's that ability to listen and act with speed in both the physical and digital worlds that really gives them an advantage that most U.S. brands and retailers don't.
Yeah, it's they have that agility, right? Although I have an example of an American brand, Amer Sports, 2 days ago. I don't know if you saw the results. Up 30%, revenues up 30%, earnings driven largely by China. China's up despite the slowdown for them. And Amer Sports are, Wilson, Salomon, and Arc'teryx. China's up for them over 40%. It's insane. And they're mostly DTC driven. And so they're doing something right. They're both tapping into a secular trend that's huge now.
Absolutely.
Everywhere. The product is great. And they seem to be getting the retail ecosystem right on that note. So that is positive news and hopeful news.
It's interesting because what they're doing in a way, it's like instead of throwing 1,000 bodies at a problem, throw 1,000 sets of ears at a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you get a very different outcome.
Yeah. Be more efficient with your approach. Michael, we're out of time. Unfortunately, it's been great having you here. Such an exciting conversation. I've learned a lot. I feel like it was so insightful. For us, that's a wrap today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was an episode that also sparked some thoughts and will spark some discussions and was as enlightening for you as it was for me. Please remember to subscribe. Until the next time, be well. See you soon.